This section presents the Augma lift working procedure for Scenario B, when the ridge is equal or above 4 mm. This scenario is performed in one stage. Scenario B is also the second stage of Scenario A. As in the second stage, we have achieved bone height of 4 mm or more. The working procedure of Scenario B contains 5 steps. Flap design. Performing the osteotomy. Elevating the sinus membrane. Filling the sinus cavity. And placing the implant. Step 1. Flap design. When designing the flap, it is important to ensure a clear view of the entire length and width of the ridge, and to accurately assess the location and position for the osteotomy. Flap design and flap reflection should reveal the entire ridge shape on both sides to meet drilling requirements. Start by making a crestal incision, slightly toward the palatal side. If necessary, make 2 short vertical incisions mesially and distally near the intended sinus lift area, both on the buccal and palatal sides, to provide a clear view of the ridge from both angles. In cases where the sinus lift is performed near natural teeth, make an intrasulcular incision next to the adjacent teeth. This eliminates the need for vertical incisions. Here is how we perform the flap design on an edentulous model. Start with an incision above the ridge, slightly to the palatal side. Proceed with short vertical incisions to fully expose the ridge. The flap design ensures a clear view during the osteotomy stage. Here is how the flap is performed in a surgery where you have adjacent teeth. We start with a crestal incision towards the palatal side, and then perform an intrasulcular incision around the adjacent teeth. Here is how a flap design should look. Step 2. Perform the osteotomy. For the osteotomy procedure of 4 mm bone height or more, we will use the following. A conventional implant pilot drill to perform the initial osteotomy. BY. Diamond milling burrs labeled from numbers 5 to 10, indicating the height of the active part in millimeters. These diamond milling burrs are used in situations where the ridge height is 4 mm or more. And Augma lift 3.7 mm osteotomes. The drilling process entails inserting the BY diamond milling burrs into the contra-angle handpiece connected to the physio dispenser. This is done at a drilling speed of 800 to 1600 rpm at a high torque, while ensuring continuous cooling with a saline solution. Perform the osteotomy based on the following points. In Scenario B, there is a minimum bone height of 4 mm. Use a conventional implant pilot drill to start the osteotomy. Drill to a depth of 2 mm less than the actual bone height shown in the CBCT. After the initial osteotomy, proceed with BY diamond milling burrs, starting 1 mm more than the depth reached with the pilot drill. For example, if the height of the ridge was 6 mm, the initial drilling with the pilot drill would go up to 4 mm, and the first diamond milling burr used is BY 5. Continue with subsequent BY diamond milling burrs. As you reach to a breach of the sinus floor, use the subsequent BY diamond milling burrs and osteotomes to check if the sinus floor is breached. If there is a gap, it means there was no breach, and you can advance with the next diamond milling burr. For example, after using BY 6, set the osteotome to 7 mm. If there is a gap, continue with BY 7 and set the osteotome to 8 mm. In case of no gap, it means there was a breach, and the next step is sinus elevation. Let us perform the osteotomy on a model. Start with a pilot drill to create the initial socket, 2 mm less than the indicated bone height. In this demonstration, the model has a 6 mm bone height. Now, use the BY diamond milling burr with the recommended drilling speed between 800 to 1600 RPM, and with constant saline cooling. Drill until you reach the stopper. Use the osteotome to check for a breach. Every 2 clockwise rotations of the adjustable stopper, add 1 mm to its length. If we used BY5, we will need to check for a breach when the osteotome is set on 6 mm. The osteotome indicates whether the sinus floor is breached. If there is a gap, continue the drilling process with the subsequent BY burr. Using the osteotome indicates there is no gap, and that the sinus floor is breached as shown. The next step is sinus floor elevation. Here is how the osteotomy is done in a live surgery. After using the pilot drill for making the initial socket, continue with BY diamond milling burrs. Check for a gap by setting the osteotome to 1 mm more than the last diamond milling burr used. If there is a gap, continue drilling using the next BY diamond milling burr. The reduction in friction signifies the membrane was reached, and the clear view of the socket indicates the site is ready for sinus elevation. Step 3. Elevating the sinus. After detaching the ridge floor, the elevation of the sinus membrane is carried out solely by the osteotomes. Each Augma lift osteotome has indicator lines in 1 mm intervals, and it comes with an adjustable stopper. Every 2 clockwise rotations of the adjustable stopper on the osteotome adds 1 mm to its length. Every 2 counterclockwise rotations of the adjustable stopper will decrease the length by 1 mm. Here's how to perform the sinus membrane elevation using the osteotomes. Adjust the osteotome stopper so that the length of the osteotome entering the osteotomy is 1 mm longer than the length of the last used BY diamond milling burr that achieved the detachment of the ridge floor. Then, insert it gently into the osteotomy until it reaches its stopper. For example, if the last BY used was BY8, adjust the osteotome to 9 mm and insert it gently into the osteotomy until it reaches its stopper. At this point, the sinus membrane is elevated by 1 mm. The procedure involves pulling out the osteotome from the osteotomy and extending its length by another millimeter in a repetitive process. Repeat the process until reaching total sinus elevation of 5 mm. This sinus elevation should be sufficient for the implant placement. Elevate the sinus membrane up to 5 mm. This way you can avoid membrane perforation while providing sufficient height for implant placement. Let us perform the sinus elevation on a model. Set the osteotome 1 mm more than the BY diamond milling burr used to breach the sinus. Slowly advance the osteotome by 1 mm to elevate the sinus membrane. Repeat this process up to 5 times. Sinus elevation should be sufficient for an insert of the corresponding implant. Here is how it looks throughout the sinus elevation procedure. Here is how the sinus elevation is performed in a live surgery. After a gradual elevation of up to 5 mm, the site is ready for sinus augmentation. Step 4. Fill the sinus cavity. For augmenting the sinus, the following Augma lift application tools are used. A 3.7 mm osteotome with curve access. A 3.7 mm osteotome with direct access. A bone carrier syringe. And a dish to put the Augma Bond apatite graft. Filling the sinus cavity. After completing the sinus elevation step using the osteotome, activate the Bond apatite syringe and inject its contents into the dish provided with the kit. Place a sterile gauze pad over the material and press gently for about 2 to 3 seconds. At this point, the material partially hardens, forming a semi-hard pulp, which is then loaded into the bone carrier syringe provided with the kit. While inserting the material into the osteotomy, position the bone carrier syringe at the opening of the osteotomy without pushing the nozzle into the hole and proceed to inject the material towards the osteotomy. If there is excess moisture in the area, place a sterile gauze pad over the material and apply gentle pressure for 1 second between fillings. Subsequently, push the material in using the osteotome. This method ensures the introduction of the material into the sinus cavity in a measured, uniform, and completely controlled manner. Do not load the bone carrier syringe with a large excess of material, as this may impede the material's exit from the bone carrier syringe nozzle. After injecting the material into the osteotomy, insert the osteotome to push the material into the sinus cavity. The length of the osteotome should be 1 mm less than the last length used to elevate the membrane. For example, if the osteotome was set at 10 mm at the sinus elevation stage, start the filling process by setting the osteotome length to 9 mm. Continue the filling process while gradually decreasing the osteotome length by 1 mm, until reaching a length of 3 mm less than the bi-diamond milling burr used to breach the sinus. To summarize, if the sinus was breached with bi-7, elevate the sinus 5 mm to a total height of 12 mm. Then begin the filling process with the osteotome by setting it to 11 mm and gradually decreasing to 4 mm. Once the filling process is complete, insert the implant. Bond apatite bone graft cement is the preferred and safe option when using Augma lift for several reasons. The consistency and viscosity of bond apatite during insertion facilitate uniform and safe filling of the sinus cavity. Bond apatite undergoes a complete transformation into bone. This eliminates the risk of the material breaking into fragments, as can occur with other bone substitutes. No membrane coverage is required. Bond apatite is bacteriostatic and allows soft tissue proliferation on top of the graft. Here is how sinus augmentation is performed on a model. Put a finger on the cap and slowly advance the shaft using a power grip until you reach the line. Eject the material into the sterilized dish and press slightly with a gauze for 2 to 3 seconds. Break the material into parts. Fill the bone carrier syringe with bond apatite and approach to the osteotomy. Position the bone carrier syringe without pushing the nozzle into the hole. Inject the material towards the osteotomy. If there is excess moisture, use a dry gauze pad and press gently for 1 second between fillings. Set the osteotome to augment the sinus by lowering it 1 mm at a time. Repeat the material insertion. Continue the filling process and sinus augmentation by decreasing the osteotome by 1 mm each time. Insert the material into the osteotome according to the protocol, decreasing the osteotome by 1 mm as the sinus cavity fills. Follow the protocol, adding more material and decreasing the osteotome by 1 mm as the cavity fills. Continue until the osteotome is 3 mm less than the B-wide diamond milling burr used to breach the sinus floor. Here is how it looks on a model. Now you are ready for placing the implant. Here is how the sinus augmentation is performed in a live surgery. Start by activating the syringe. Eject the material into the dish and press with a dry, sterile gauze for 2 to 3 seconds. Load the material into the bone carrier syringe. For a smooth ejection of the material, do not overfill the bone carrier syringe. Place the bone carrier syringe at the opening of the osteotomy. Eject the material, and use the osteodome to place it inside the osteotomy. Press with a gauze for 1 second if there is too much moisture in the area. The osteodome should decrease by 1 mm from its level in the membrane elevation stage. Repeat the process by filling the bone carrier syringe, ejecting, pushing with the osteodome, and using the gauze. The osteodome should be reduced by 1 mm every time. Step 5. Place the implant. Here are the key points for placing the implant. After filling the osteotomy, an implant can be inserted. The diameter of the implant should be 5 mm or above and has threads that are located along the entire implant length to ensure good initial stability from the bone of the ridge itself. Once the implant has been inserted and secured in the ridge, perform a Valsalva maneuver up to 3 times, and close and suture the soft tissue. Note, in the case of multiple implants, refrain from performing the Valsalva maneuver until all the implants have been inserted. After augmenting the sinus, the site is ready for an implant placement. Here is how implant placement is performed on a model. The recommended implant length is 10 mm or more with a diameter of 5 mm or more. Complete the procedure by suturing. Here is how implant placement is performed in a live surgery.